Welcome, everyone, to our third table talk. I am thrilled you are here. Join us in person or live. And this is also going to be available as a podcast episode and a YouTube episode for people to watch the conversation as well. Before we really get into navigating the joy and logistics of solo travel, I wanted to give you a sense of where people might be joining us from. So you can see from east to west coast, and in between the United States, the continental United States. We also have folks registered from Hawaii. We have some folks registered from Ecuador. We had someone who wrote in the comments of their registration that they were on the east coast of Australia and trying to beam in to join our conversation. So it's always nice to see where people are gathering in community. We see people on the screen, but it's always nice to see where people might be along the way. There are about 185 registrants. There may be a few more because obviously I'm not watching registration right now. Before we get started with the program, I just want to make sure everyone has a sense of ground rules. If you're not speaking, have your microphone on mute. That means ambient noise won't be an issue. You, as I said, are welcome to add your location to your name area. Respectful listening is key. Everyone's perspective is valued and important. Questions and comments are welcome. You'll use chat for that, and we'll do our best towards the end to address those, as many as we can. And just to have a sense that our discussion, the entire intention is for it to be supportive, informative, solution focused. So that's the framing of how we'll participate together as a community. And in terms of some feedback I've gotten from past programs, or people really would appreciate a roadmap of what's going to play out as part of the program. And so that's for anyone who can see the screen and isn't calling in. That's on the screen now. So we are fortunate to be joined by three fabulous panelists. We'll have about a 25-minute conversation with them. And then as you were registering, people submitted some questions, some themes, and we'll try and touch on some of those, sort of categorized to touch on that as well. We'll do a quick period of comments and Q&A, anything that you want to ask Kay, Steve, or Susan, or just as follow-up in general. And then we'll do a quick wrap-up, and we will think about the next time we have this conversation, because there are plenty of people who have shared that they are avid travelers and really have an interest in participating in a conversation like this, which I think is fantastic. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is based in Boston. Kay Dougherty has traveled to 65 countries and all 7 continents. As a former travel blogger, she's done everything from DIY trips and smaller, large groups to river, ocean, and expedition cruises. And she has fantastic, strong insights on all of them. So we're so glad she could join us. Joining from Virginia is Steve Gordon. Steve is an avid traveler since his college study abroad days, which was just yesterday. He scuba dived across the Caribbean, backpacked the Yucatan, toured Europe via Eurail, and has given a tremendous amount of thought to strategies for traveling solo, but not alone. And Susan Kitchell is joining us from San Francisco, California, recently back from New Zealand. She was just sharing with us. Um, and for Susan, travel is all about new perspectives and lingering in cafes and contemplating history and staying endlessly curious and energized before returning home, newly inspired to plan the next journey. It is going to be a fantastic conversation. I'm thrilled the three of them have joined us. The way our panel conversation is going to go is we have a few segments. The first is really focusing on how to evaluate the landscape of group options and handle the mental preparation of stepping out alone, and really taking that leap. And so the first question I thought could be to Kay, and given your experience across the entire full spectrum and continuum, from small group trips to expedition cruises across all 7 continents, how do you evaluate and choose a group style or itinerary that aligns with your values, your pace, and your personal need for independence?
A lot of things. I would say, so I'll take them in the order you mentioned them. Values. I look for a company that focuses on cultural experiences and maybe studies the history. I don't personally look for a tour that's like all food focused or military history focused or things like that. I like history. I like nature. I like music and I like free time. And I like museums, artwork, things like that. And so I look, do they also focus on similar areas that meet those interests? I'm not sure you want to call them values, but interests. Or values, do they give back in any way? A lot of the companies do philanthropic things in the areas where they travel. And I think that's worth looking at. I was with a company in Costa Rica earlier than this year. And we went to this small town, and that's almost dignified, and where they actually bought a refrigerator for the local school that had just gotten a roof on all of the school in the last year. And they talked about how that refrigerator changed how everyone could how long they could be at school and eat safely. So it's not always that they have some huge thing, but I like to see that they have some values that there's evidence of. Pace was your other thing. I like a fast pace. I talk too fast. I walk too fast. I do everything too fast. I drive people nuts. So I like a fast pace in terms of my personal getting around pace. I don't like a fast pace and the old, if we're probably mostly old enough to remember if it's Tuesday, this must be Belgium. I don't want that at all. So I want to know what's the minimum number of nights they spend somewhere, how much time is on a bus, or are there a lot of inter and intra country flights? How much of my time is really experiencing a place and how much is in transportation? And another thing that relates to pace too, because if there's a lot of driving around, you can bet you're going to have a lot of getting out of bed at 5 a.m. And I know some people think that's a splendid time. I think it should be illegal. And independence, I think that was your other thing. Like, hey, I'm pretty independent. So I want a trip that doesn't include all the meals. I don't want to go to all my meals at restaurants that will take groups because they're not usually the better places. Or in the little nooks or things they can't book that many people. So I like time on my own. I don't want every day booked. I want to take a day to just do whatever I want to do, go buy something I don't need or something. And so those are things I look at, the values. Do they align with my interests and my values as a person? Pace both my own and of the trip. And then independence, like how much do you want to be on your own versus do you like to be with other people? I always say I'm a gregarious introvert. And I go until then, I'm like, I need to go and plug myself back in the wall.
The social battery.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Building on the choice of itinerary, Steve, when you're looking to join a group as a solo traveler, how do you achieve that balance of traveling solo but not alone? Um, are there quote unquote green flags or specific factors you look for in a group dynamic that will be a good fit for an independent traveler?
One of the things that I look at is whether or not the company itself is solo friendly.
Mm,
That is really important to me because statistically, we're about a quarter of the population, if not bigger, at this point. And I don't want to just see someone who knows how to market to us. I want to see someone who knows how to provide for the things that we need. And I'll talk to them and ask, and I'll ask them how many other solo travelers are signed up for this trip, because I do like my own downtime, but I also want to know that if I want to have meals with people, that I'll find others. And I'll ask them, what do you do if the meal isn't listed on the trip and I want to eat with people? And I want to hear their answer. So I asked the company that. I'll just tell you, a National Geographic expedition that I did, all the meal tables were communal, and that was a real plus for me. And there were about a half a dozen, maybe 10 solo travelers on that trip, and we were all very much welcomed. And in fact, some of the couples said, "Yeah, we got kind of bored with each other. It's nice having other people to talk to as well." So it to me, those are green flags. And I carefully look at them. I also look at the reviews. And there's so much research now available. And TripAdvisor, often you can check solo and get all the reviews from the solo travelers of a hotel, of a trip. And I think that's really important too. And I'll tell you, the other resource that I've been using recently is AI. I go on ChatGPT and I will ask it, I saw this trip by this company. It's in a location I want to go to. I'm a solo traveler. What's your thoughts? And they'll go out, ChatGPT will go out and find the reviews done by other solo travelers. So there's a lot of tools that we now have available that can help us in that regard. And I also know I'm like, hey, there's sometimes I just want to be by myself as well. And I don't want to have every meal with everyone else either. On the other hand, I want to know that I have options, and options to be spontaneous as well. So if I saw something really cool that day, I know that I have options to have dinner with a group of people as well. And I'm a nature person. It's my number one priority that I look for. And I find that there are other solo travelers who love nature. So it's one thing. I know other people like other things like the culinary tours. And I think there's a lot of solo travelers who do that as well. Um, so it's things that for our conversation. I like educational stuff too. In fact, educational stuff in nature is nirvana for me.
yeah.
And often you get other people who are into that and it sparks a lot of good conversation. So I hope that responded to you.
Yeah. So, Susan, we know that choosing a trip is one thing, but then how do you actually take that first leap um, and join a major journey on your own? That can feel really daunting. Um,
I'm
Knowing how adventurous you've been and how endlessly curious you are and have been, um, how do you prepare mentally for these new journeys? Um, was
I'll
there
start.
yeah, was there ever hesitation or nervousness before you took those first trips?
There's hesitation and nervousness with every trip I'm taking, but I started after COVID. I retired 4 weeks before the lockdown. So my travel plans were quickly aborted. And
Mm,
so I was able to put off the anxiety. And when I finally felt comfortable enough to travel, I started out by going to two cities I had intended to go to for many years. I went to Savannah and Charleston, where I knew I spoke the language. I knew I'd like
right.
the food. I knew there was enough to do on my own that I didn't have to worry about having somebody organize a way to get from point A to point B. And so the biggest challenge then was to actually get myself on an airplane after COVID, after the world started to open up. And once I did that and I came home and I didn't get COVID and I was
just fine, and I was out and about every minute of the day and into the evening by myself. I was like, "Who's ready to go travel?" And so I polled everyone I knew, and they were all, I don't know, it's COVID, eh." And I was like, "I gotta go. I'm getting older. I don't know how long I have on this earth, and there are things I wanna do." And so I started thinking about where I wanted to go, and I always had a thing about Morocco. So I just said, "Oh, I'm gonna go to Morocco." And I knew that wasn't someplace that I felt comfortable going alone. And I also knew that I am not a big bus person. I
Ah,
don't like, um, I don't want to follow anybody around holding an umbrella, or I don't want to be wearing the lanyard saying, "I'm Susan. If I'm lost, please call." So I started just using the internet, and I started
mhm,
thinking, what do you do if you're interested in certain things? And I'm a cook, but I don't want to cook on vacation too. And I
mhm,
don't wanna bake on vacation because I bake at home. So what is it that I really love? And I started really thinking about that. And so I realized I really love textiles and crafts. So I started Googling around for trips that were focused on textiles and crafts. And lo and behold, I found a textiles and crafts tour company based out of Australia that was going to Morocco. And since it was
wow.
based out of Australia, I was like, "Ooh, can I really go? Do they take Americans?" So I emailed them and they were like, "Sure, we'd love to have you." And it turns out it's really great because our dollar is so much stronger than theirs that I felt like I was getting a real bargain. And it was one of the best experiences of my life. There were 10 women. I also did only women because it's been my experience that sometimes when you're with couples, you don't really get to eat with anybody because everybody's eating together. It's by twos, or maybe if they came with another couple. So I wanted to make sure. I just thought the women would be more open. And so I met 9 Australians, if you can travel with Australians, they are some of the most fun-loving people you will ever meet, and they make everything easy. So it's, I don't know, I jumped off the boat into the water, and I didn't drown. And like,
Right.
okay, I'm a gregarious introvert. I need my downtime. I like to know that if I want people around, they're there. I like to know that if I want some time alone, that nobody's going to get their nose bent out of shape because I say I'm not going, or I just need to spend some time alone. And it worked out just fine. And I've been to, since November of 23, I've now been to 16 countries. And some in combination, not 16 trips, but and it's been great. And I've going to New Zealand because I wanted to go from top to bottom. I knew that I'd have to go with an organized tour company. And so I found one that sounded good. I asked the questions that Steve asked. There were 20 people, which was the biggest group I ever traveled with. And, I had plenty of time alone. I made sure of that in the itinerary, that there were free days. There was free time on every day. Most of these trips, from what I read, they're done at 4 o'clock, and if it's summertime, you've still got 4 hours of light to do whatever you want. Um, I my curiosity in Morocco, I actually got to go to, something that most people don't think exists in Morocco. Our tour guide happens to know the lead singer for the most famous band in the country, and they were playing a local a bar in Casablanca. And I was like, "Oh, can I come?" And I can't believe I just asked him that, but I did. And it was like one of the greatest evenings of my life. It was great music that I didn't understand a word. It was like looking around and going, "Look at all these women in Morocco wearing next to nothing. Look at all these people smoking and drinking and having a good time." And I was like, my view of some places is incorrect. So it's that adventure. And yeah, I think I've talked too long. I'm just,
That's fantastic. The other thing I got a kick out of is when I emailed you about participating in the panel, you wrote to me from what was tomorrow for me. I had never received an email from tomorrow. So for me, that was a kick.
yeah, I was in.
Um, right. So I just enjoyed that experience. There may be others you write to who also enjoy those kinds of experiences. Um, Steve, touching back on that whole social side piece, um, how do you navigate meaningful connections with fellow travelers while still honoring your own autonomy or recognizing, as Kay said, her the social battery, all of those pieces?
So I'll talk about two strategies I've used. One was I use Meetup here in the Washington, D.C. area all the time. And you know what? When I was in Quito, Ecuador, I went on Meetup and there was a language exchange group that met in a restaurant one evening, and I went to it. And it was a mixture of people from all over the world, many of whom wanted to practice English and Spanish. And I had a wonderful evening. It was one of my memorable things that I did. And I know just from Meetup, because I belong to a couple of London Meetup groups because they do really cool outdoor activities, and I want to see what those are there. And it's a great way to meet other people when you're traveling. When it comes to being in a tour group, I went on a tour and I knew that there were only a few of us who were solo, and it was a larger group when we were at full strength. And what I ended up doing was I went up to the people who were other solo travelers and I said to them, other people here on the trip are here as a couple. We're here solo. Why don't we all look out for each other? And the three of us then became a little module thing, and we would save each other seats on the bus. And I also found out you could just go and ask the tour leader who are the other solo travelers. I waited for her to read them off as she was doing attendance the first day, and that's how I figured it out. But I didn't have to do it that way. I could have just gone and said to the leader, I want to know the other solo travelers so we can all get together and do things. And throughout the trip, we did a lot of stuff together. We had some meals together. I still get text messages from some of the other two solo travelers from that trip. We have a little iChat that we started while we were on the trip, and it's continued. So I really think being proactive is important, not being a wallflower. And I'm a bit of an introvert as well. So I did have to find myself being extra friendly. And really all it takes is the first day or two getting out of my introvert state and being friendly. And then one thing leads to another. Same thing, National Geographic trip I was on. I met so many people, and really it was around the meals. That was, you sit down with people, you get to know people, and that was a really important facet of it. I've also been to a spa where they have a communal table. They call it a captain's table or a communal table. And I would meet people at dinner, and then you see them throughout the day, and you feel much more like you're together. And I always get a single room. I am not into sharing rooms with people I don't know. Last time I did that was college, and I don't really need to do that again in my life. So that's one way to preserve independence is to get your own room. And most of the companies, they do that. And one thing I'll also say is that it's important to investigate if there's a single supplement and how much it is. And
Mhm.
there are companies now that are doing a lot better at that where either there isn't one or it's minimal. It's not double the price. I have seen that also, and I just avoid those companies because on principle, I just think that's not a company that I want to do business with. So it's a combination. It really, but if you got to strategize and you got to come out of your shell, at least for a little while at the beginning of a trip, and then it's
Mhm.
okay to kind of go back in again.
Those sound like really good tips. I can see people are additionally sharing comments and tips in the chat. The questions that were submitted during registrations do touch on different abilities and all of that. So when we get to that segment, we'll be able to touch on some of those. I didn't completely ignore the information you provided. I thought it was really important and grouped it thematically so we can hopefully touch on some of those. So just want folks to know everyone's input is really helpful and shaped our conversation today. Um, Susan, back to that loving to wander market or lingering in a cafe. Um, are there particular best practices or practices that you have for intentionally stepping away from the group to to have the independent experiences you might want?
So, what I do is I finally found a use for all those ridiculous greeting cards with envelopes that I get in the junk mail. and I hold on to the envelopes, not that I'm sending letters or anything. And I make myself a book for every place I'm going. And I start out by doing research and I write down things that I've read about or I want to do. I cut things out of magazines and I throw that all together. And preparing for my upcoming trip, I decided that it's time, no matter how I feel about it, that I learn to use AI. And
Ah,
so I went on ChatGPT and I learned to make a map. So this is for my trip, my first day once I land. I was like, I wanted to take it easy. I'm on my way to South Africa. I'm going to be in Amsterdam for a couple of days. And I was like, I want to go here and I want to go here and I want to go here and I want to go here. Make me a map. And then once I saw the map, I was like, oh, I don't really want to do that. Let me look at what else I want to add in and subtract. And so it was nice to actually come out with, I'm like, look at me. I could be the next Steves. But it's something that I'm learning something. I'm learning to deal with AI. And I'm also I was kind of against letting AI give me suggestions, but I have another window open next to AI next to ChatGPT, and I'm like, "Yeah, does that museum still exist? Does that restaurant
right.
still exist? You might like the chatbot might like to eat there, but that's not what I want to eat." So I'm
Right.
always checking what's going on. But I do plan, and if I'm on the textile tours that I go on, I also, I'm for most places, this is going to be the only time I'm ever going to be here. So if I'm doing a whole trip just based around indigo dyeing, I still want to see other things in
Mhm.
Uzbekistan. And so I want to make sure there's free time and I can get to the places using public transit. And so it's a matter of, I think it comes down to, I'm a nurse. I've always been a planner. I now use my skills for this. And so if what I've learned is if you have a will, there's going to be a way. And there's also a way um, that you can ask a group that you're with if they'll join you.
Mm,
They'll make a detour to get to where you want to go. And that happened plenty in Morocco for me.
that's
So
wonderful.
it really worked out great. And so I've learned what's the worst thing that can happen if you ask? Somebody says no. So you figure out another way to do it. You go on the bus alone, or
Mhm.
you have them drop you off somewhere and you Uber back. It all works out. It all works out, but it takes planning. It does take planning.
I think the embracing of the AI piece, I could see it resonating with people all over the various, rectangles.
So,
Um,
Ailene, if I can just say, I moved to San Francisco because of the Grateful Dead. I really didn't have a plan. But it was like when I was thinking after that snowstorm in Boston, I'm like, where am I going? I'm like, I go all over the country to see them. I might as well just move to where they live. And I didn't really have a plan. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a plan. I'm going to live where the Grateful Dead live. And I'm 50 years beyond that now. I think that planning is something that I have to do.
that's that's fantastic. But it's still good to pay attention to the Grateful Dead from time to time, if that what works for you. So thank you for sharing those sort of practical boundaries and opportunities to follow your "I'm going to be here once" kind of thing. Kay, for you, shifting to the structural side, um, Steve mentioned the single supplement fee, or managing solo real logistics in general can be a real wrinkle. So you have an extensive background in navigating different types of travel groups and cruises. Are there some practical tips for handling these pieces, the logistical, the financial, that makes it as seamless as possible?
I think most of us have a budget. Um, it's so nice not to, but so you have to think, and it's like if you ever had anything renovated, you had this budget and it costs 20% more. That travel can often do that. So know how tight your budget is. And if it's tight, you may just build some wiggle room in because it rarely is exactly what you've budgeted, especially now. There's so much price volatility. But I think some of the things there know what's included and what's isn't. For example, I went to Morocco last year and I ended up going on a private trip with a friend, which sounds like, oh my God, it was no more expensive than a group trip with two nice but not spectacular companies. Um, we didn't have any dinners included, but we had a national guide and a driver who took us everywhere for 2 weeks. So I'm happy to buy my own dinner. So what are the trade-offs? That was extreme. That's for some intended trip like that. But what's included? What isn't? Sometimes you'll look at a trip and think this one's so many days for I always divide the number of days you're actually on the trip, not the day you get there and not the day you leave. What is it per day? What's your budget? Is it $300 per day? Your budget is $500. Yeah, have a sense of what your budget is. And remember, tips at a minimum. You'll need to tip the tour guide if you're on tour. You may need to tip all the local ones too. So is that included? One company, and I'll say their name, I'm not shilling for them, Overseas Adventure Travel. They're based in Boston and they have trips without solo supplements. And one of the things I do like about them is all the trip tips are covered except the tour guide. So you don't have to get a whole bunch of small bills in different currency and think, what do we give the bus driver today? And what do we give this? But they're all covered except the tour guide. But you're always going to need to tip the tour guide and probably in local currency. So build that into how you plan. Again, understand the trade-offs. If you take a lower price trip, understand the three-star hotels in much of the world, certainly in Western Europe, rarely have air conditioning. So we're looking at record heat waves. Think about that. And you can address that issue with them. And no one ever told Europe in particular that screens have been invented, which I just don't know why we can't get the word across the pond. There's not a window with a screen. So think about the trade-offs. I get an eSIM for my phone. I don't care about making phone calls like traditional ones when I travel. So I get an eSIM for data. That's very easy to do if you have the smartphone. Google how to do it. Super easy, way cheaper than using the international plan with your company. I use WhatsApp. It's your friend. It's free. It's reasonably secure. It's encrypted. And your group will often make a WhatsApp chat group. So learn to use it. It's how I can communicate with my sister or friends, or you can make phone calls on it for free, all for free. But don't save your money on your medical insurance. And by that, I don't mean go spend a lot of money on it. But make sure you have what you need. Don't assume if you're on Medicare that you're going to be covered. Don't assume it's it. US government program, don't assume it. Some people tell me they are, some people tell me they aren't. I assume I'm not. But what I worry more about as I get older is, which I haven't yet, but if I do, is medical evacuation. Get that.
Yeah.
And when you look at insurance plans, they often say it's included. And just think about this because I know two, I used to be a travel blogger, and two who've gotten bad accidents, one in Australia, and I don't remember what the other one was. And they had evacuation, but it's always to the nearest facility that insurance company deems appropriate. And there are two companies, one's Global Rescue, one's MedJet. MedJet, you could do just one trip for $95, I believe, ballpark. You can get trip for year memberships, and they bring you back to your choice. I would want to come back to Mass General. I don't want to be rehabbing in Australia or other places that may have fabulous medical care or terrible. But I don't have anyone to help me navigate it. I don't. So really pay attention to your insurance and what it means when it says evacuation insurance. That's
If I could
my
just
little
say,
ad.
if I don't carry the type of insurance Kate is talking about because I have a credit card that provides that kind of insurance. And that's why I pay for that credit card. And also, I have an annual plan, which is much cheaper than a trip by trip plan. So for me, when I look at a budget, if I had to insure each trip individually, I would not be taking the trips because the older you get, the more the individual cost is. So you can get an
Okay.
annual plan, but you do have to check what's important to you. And
I
that
have an
I think
annual
is
plan for
important.
health also, Susan, and I have an annual plan for evacuation. I don't do them on a trip by trip basis because I do about 4 trips a year. And so
It
it's,
does add up.
you know,
So just
it
just
adds
so
up.
people are aware that there are other options than either buying it through Oat or buying it through,
Oh,
whatever trip
don't buy it.
you're gonna buy it from. There are, really good places, and Steve just put one in the chat that actually will compare different plans for you. And you should
Yeah, I
also
would.
ask because I thought that my HMO didn't cover anything overseas, but they do. So there's an extra thing that I didn't know I had.
And you mentioning the travel company providing it, I have traveled with OAT and I will not buy theirs. It's very expensive. And you are not the named insured, which is nothing we're going to go into here. They are. So if there's a claim and they pay it, they'll get paid to them. And then you try to get it from them. Don't buy it from your travel provider. So I'm glad you brought that up, Susan. That is not the place to buy it. You'll pay way too much.
And also, I would second WhatsApp, but I do use my phone carrier actually has a very generous plan for a month, and I do use my data and I text and I check the different things during the day. Sometimes I'll call somebody, and so I like having my carrier's plan. It's the same plan I have here, but I get a monthly rate for international, and that works for me. So you have to look at what works for you and what's out there because there's a lot out there. I mean,
Right.
it's something that, especially for seniors, travel is now a big thing, and it's
Mm.
And
everybody wants to get in on it.
this is where ChatGPT can be very helpful. AARP also has a lot of resources
That's
for seniors who are traveling. There's an enormous amount. And in fact, I'm always surprised when I come across some really great resource because I've done a lot of research, but there's just a lot out there.
Um, Excellent. I know a couple of people have put in chat they'd love to formulate a checklist. One thing you can do is you're able to save the chat. I know that's a lot of text. I will see what comes out of chat and maybe ask our panelists to contribute some resources we can send as follow up if that.
And if I can just say, Aileen, because the chat pops up on my screen, so I
Yeah.
read really quickly. The people
Yep.
who are asking about limited mobility, what I find is really important is when you're looking at trips, actually know what your capacity is. One of the trips I was looking at was an e-bike trip, and I haven't been on a bike in years. And I was like, "Yeah, but it's an electric bike." So I went and I pulled one of the electric bikes out of the little stands we have around town. I was like, "Yeah, I'm not doing that." And it's really being honest with yourself. How far can you walk in a day? How many flights of stairs can you go up? Will you need to carry your own baggage? I
Mm.
start out pretty light, but I end up pretty heavy with my bag. And it's because I buy fabric. And it's so you really have to be honest with yourself. And then you can do, if you're good with the computer or have your grandkid or somebody do it for you, just Google. I use a cane. I can go up 2 stairs, 2 flights of stairs. I can't carry my own bag. And I don't want to go more than 3,000 miles. And you're going to wind up with a bunch of stuff to look at.
The other thing I'll say, and I used to enforce the Americans with Disabilities Acts, and I think the United States has done a better job of becoming accessible. It's not perfect. Believe me, there's still a lot of issues here. But when I go to other countries, I can see the difference in the built environment. I was recently in Canada, and it looked to me like they had some of the things there. Now it was also on the border in Niagara Falls. So it may well be that they were making sure that they were as accessible as across the way in New York. But there's also several really good websites for people who have disabilities and want to travel, where people have put information up. And there's also what I really like about it is there'll be people will put up little videos and information about issues they've had. And they talk about the companies and which ones are particularly good for people with disabilities. There's resources out there. And even if you don't want to think of yourself as having a disability, having limited mobility might fit that. It's worth availing yourself of some of those websites to see got people who've done a lot of thinking about it and been frustrated, frankly,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of things that are not accessible as well.
And if I can say as a nurse, the one thing I would advise everybody is just stay hydrated because I've learned not to tell everybody initially I'm a nurse because then I know everybody's medical history and it's like I didn't come along to know your medical history. But it's most ailments that people have can be alleviated by hydration. Certainly not mobility ailments, but any other
Right.
kind of ailment as they start out, unless it's a major issue. But anyway, that's just bring along some electrolytes, buy a bottle of water, put the electrolytes in it that way.
Stay hydrated. So it is evident from our conversation that this panel conversation could go on for 2, 3, 4 hours, right? Depending at what point in the day some people are in. Um, so I don't want to skip over some of the registrant Q&As that came in, and I'm also mindful of time. So I'm going to try and meld that all together to also give our group in general opportunities to chat with each other. So in the registrant in questions and comments, there were three themes that really came through. The first was safety, emergencies, and navigation. One person asked, if you have no sense of direction, how does one safely travel alone within an unknown area? Which I think is a fantastic question. Again, looks like it's resonating with a lot of people. And I think is a great way to put it. Two, are there particular things that come to mind for any of the three of you that um, can sort of touch on that?
I grew up in New York City in what some people would call not the best neighborhood. And I have a spidey sense, is the way I put it. It's do I walk down dark alleys? No, I don't do that at home. Why would I do it somewhere I don't know? Um, and I read the local news. I ask the guides, I want to go to this place. It's on my list of places I want to go. Is it safe for me to go alone? How do you recommend I get there? Once I'm there, am I going to be able to get back easily? Because there's the going, but there's also the returning. And
Mm.
so it's ask the questions. It was once told that if you don't ask for what you need, you're not going to get it. And so
And I'll jump in on the lack of sense of direction. I used to travel with my sister a lot until unfortunately her health prevented that. And she would not be offended if she heard this. She has no sense of direction. I used to like to play tricks on her. We'd get out of the elevator in a hotel and I'd turn the wrong way just to see if she'd follow me. So that's the kind of sister I am. But so I think one theme you've heard all of us mention technology. So learn how to drop a pin in Google Maps. So when you leave, drop a pin for where you left and then put it where you want to go. I am doing this with my AirPods. It's get AirPods or whatever the equivalent is for an Android phone. And then you can have, if you have an eSIM or a travel plan like Susan does, you can have it talking in your ear, telling you where to go, but you're not looking at your phone saying, I'm a tourist. I don't know where I am. The oldest was walking down the street with a map. The new ones is your phone. So you can be alert to your surroundings, not look like a tourist, and they don't know it's talking in your ear. But try the technology at home. Don't wait until you're going out in Athens and you don't know how to use it. You don't know how to drop a pin. Do it at home. Oh, I see
Right.
someone says you can drop a pin in WhatsApp now too. I didn't know
Right.
things.
That's also don't wear a brand new pair of sneakers on a trip. Right. Right. Don't do anything for the first time as
Oh,
you
right.
land in the right.
But
Um,
something
Steve, do you
else,
have something else to share before we switch to another theme?
yeah, I just want to mention the State Department website
oh yeah,
whenever I travel outside
I,
the country, no matter where it is, even if it's a place that I know well, I go on the State Department
yeah, I-
website and I'll just tell you, I've been to Baja California, which is part of Mexico recently, and the State Department website had a whole discussion of one of the hospitals there being really fraudulent and ripping people off and being careful about going there. And I don't go anywhere without first reading that information. And as a solo traveler, I think it's important I often ask the people who run the hotel and how's the neighborhood here. I got in late one night. It was actually keto. I got in at about 10 o'clock, and I was starving. And 2 blocks away was a McDonald's. And I asked the front desk, "Is it safe to walk over there?" And they then told me the concierge lounge is open. You can get the same stuff for a little more higher quality. But if you really want to go, we're going to send security with you. That told me something right
Yeah.
there about walking around that and what they thought about walking around that neighborhood at night. Even though it was 2 blocks, they said, we would rather you go with one of our employees. And then I also learned about the concierge lounge, which was amazing. And it had
One of the
much better
parts
than McDonald's.
One of the parts of the State Department website that I use, and I can't remember the name of it, maybe you know, Steve, is where you register where you're going and how long you'll be there.
Yeah.
And so I get texts if there's an alert, if there's something that's changed, and that's for medical alerts, safety alerts, whatever. And so oh, STEP, there it is. Thank you, Hillary.
Yeah, step.
And that's something that I do before I leave the country, just so I do get that notification. War breaks out, I need to know.
And
There's
building a bit
courses.
on that, know where the consulate is where you're going in the country. It may not be where you're going to be, but know where it is and stick the phone number in your phone. Just so you have it. The chances of you needing it are close to zero, but if you do need it, you'll be glad to not have to be scrambling for it.
And I'd go on Google or ChatGPT too and just say, is it safe to walk around this neighborhood? Is such and such a place? And it might find some news articles. I'm going to say something else very basic. Take a picture of your passport and your driver's license before you go. Very important. A lot of people
Definitely.
get to do that, but I have multiple pictures and our phones can now find them. You can just do a search for passport in your photo gallery and it'll find your pictures of your passport.
You can also
Doesn't even
do
hurt to
that
have a
with
hard
your health.
copy.
You can make copies and also of your health
Interesting.
card, your health information, whatever the medical
Health
coverage
insurance.
is. Yeah.
I don't
Front
carry
and
the
back of
don't
those.
I don't carry the copies because it's too easy if my wallet got taken or anything. This way it's just in a locked phone, and it takes a lot more to unlock my phone than to open my wallet.
True. Those are very good points. On the note of physical ease and adaptability and limitations, one registrant noted they were legally blind, but still deeply love traveling and want to know what assistance might be available, what kind of guidance, institutional tools, pacing shifts can you share for customizing a journey so it can be done with more ease and comfort?
So I'm going to say in the United States, it's a lot easier for people who are blind because many museums have audio access. So if you're walking around a museum and people who are sighted don't necessarily know this, it's similar. If you know the captioning for people who are deaf, there's also access for people who are blind. I am not certain that exists in other countries,
Well,
especially in English.
In Japan, the accessibility for the blind is really dealt with even on getting around the street because there are certain things built into the street. So if you're using a cane, you know by the formation of the dots where you are and where to go. I don't know if that's actually, if it's Braille and Braille that we use. I don't really know how Braille works around the world, but again, if you have an audio assist on your computer and ask ChatGPT or just Google traveling abroad while blind, something will come up. Either it'll say, don't do it, or it'll say, here are 10 things to look at.
And the National Federation of the Blind and the American Council of the Blind might have some resources on their websites
Or the
too.
lighthouse. Yeah.
Yeah, Lighthouse is
America,
another word. Yeah.
Excellent. And of course, this part of the conversation could go on and on, right? We are trying to accomplish quite a bit, a robust agenda here. The other theme that really came up a number of times is changing life dynamics. So for some people, solo aging is navigating on their own. For some, it's with a partner, married, spouse, etc. But that also sometimes comes with life dynamic changes where that partner, that spouse, that favorite person to go travel with, sibling, whoever, um, their ability to travel um, changes, and so people might find themselves without their traditional support system, whatever that means to the individual. Um, what kind of encouragement, wisdom, practical advice would you offer when people are trying to adapt to those kinds of things and thinking about travel?
I mean,
I'll say one thing is that if you go with a group that doesn't have a solo supplement, you're going to meet other people in the same boat. You're going to meet other widows and widowers. You're going to, whatever the reason is, people who are still married, maybe they're a caretaker for a spouse who isn't well, or their spouse isn't well, they don't need a caretaker. You are not alone, and you will meet other people that have been, if not in your identical situation, who totally get it. And people are very supportive, of almost unanimously supportive when someone is taking that. Travelers encourage other travelers. We don't say, you should stay at home with your sick husband. It was like, oh, someone else could stay with him. Come join us, you know. So you are not alone. I think that's a main thing to know.
Other
I
thoughts
think
on that?
I think it's also something if you're used to traveling with a spouse or a sibling or a parent, and you're the one who's still going, you come home to that person. So I think an honest discussion of what does it mean if you go and they don't,
Yeah, you're
is
right.
one to have.
And I'm
So
going to add one
Yet
other
not a
thing.
reason to stay home.
Well,
agreed.
one other thing that's happened for me is that have loved travel all my life, but when I had a full-time job, it got in the way of my travels. So I'm
Rude.
doing a lot more now. And it's interesting because when I was more college age, graduate school age, I had my let's go, whatever, let's go Europe, let's go, whatever. And that was everyone had that. And that's how you traveled. There are so many more resources now. And I feel like I'm learning anew how to do this, have some of the base knowledge. But for people who are like coming to this fresh again, who might have done it before, and maybe had done something more structured while you were working, that describes me. It's really, there's a lot of resources out there. I also want to emphasize something that Kay said. If a company is solo friendly, they don't have a solo supplement, you're more likely to find other solo travelers there too. And it's one reason to look for those because that's a good place to go.
I also think that if you're traveling, what we used to call off season, when the only time we were traveling was between semesters,
Mm.
college, most of the people traveling now in October, November, December, January, February, March are people who are retired. They
Mm.
don't have to deal with schools. They're not dealing with work anymore. It's a lot less crowded. It's a lot cheaper everywhere you go. And you wind up meeting a lot of people who are of a certain age or that give or take a decade on each side. I've met people who are well in their 80s and people who are just retiring at 55, which God did. I wish I could have done that. But there are a lot of people out there doing this on their own now because that's just what life gives you at this age. And
And
so
that's a good
you're
way
not
to do
alone.
so,
I think, yeah, I
to
think that
save some money. You know, if
absolutely.
people want to travel, sometimes you'll look at an itinerary and think, oh, I'd love to go there in April, but that's $3,000 more than if I go in November. So it's back to trade offs. Maybe go in November. But if you have to be willing to
And,
wear a coat if you don't want to, but you have to. In some places, you can't really go in off season. That's true. Some of the Greek islands, people all go to Mykonos in November. Guess what? Nothing's open. So you also have to know, in some cases, places
Yeah, but
don't have much open.
some of that, the one year I lived in Boston, I love to go to the Cape in the winter.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
yeah.
I
I do
I'd
too.
rather go to the Cape in the winter than in the summer and deal with that
Right.
traffic.
Yes.
If
So,
I could add two other additional
Go
things.
ahead. I'm gonna
Oh,
de-spotlight everybody. You
okay.
got all of
What
us as you do.
one is so Sunday and Fridays are the most expensive days to fly. And and Saturdays are definitely the cheaper days. I now feel like I have that luxury of flying other days. The other thing I want to add in is that I add buffer days for all my trips now. I never used to do that. And it's about sanity. It's about adjusting to time zones. It's about a lot of stuff. And when I get somewhere, I want a few days just to decompress from the logistical stuff. And then same thing, if I'm on a tour, I want some time at the end because I might want to go back and look at something that the tour didn't cover as well as I wanted to, but it also gives me a little bit more time. And that is, for me, that's part of having more time affluence than I used to have.
And that's one other thing that, even if you have the extra time, you have to know what your body can tolerate. I've learned to do whatever it is that is happening when I land. If I land at 6 a.m., I spend the rest of the day awake no matter what it takes because that's how I beat jet lag. If I land and it's 11 p.m., I'm gonna try to make myself go to sleep or at least lay in bed in a dark room because I'm just trying to adapt. So everyone adapts differently. I agree with Steve in terms of if you have the luxury of having a few days before and after, that's the best way to go because then you ease into the trip and you ease out of the trip. And you get to do a lot of things that may not be on your itinerary with whatever group you're going with. But I think what I was gonna say before, Aileen, is I think there are differences between solo travel, which I've done. I did Portugal on my own, and being a solo in a small group and being a solo in a large group. And, there are 3 different ways to travel solo, and each one has a plus and a minus, and you have to find what works for you.
Excellent. Um, that's a good place to put in a lip, right? I wanted to give folks a little bit of time to share or ask questions um, as part of our panel tonight or today. Hi, Hillary.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I I recently stumbled upon, totally by accident, another way to get to bypass jet lag completely. I get my stomach on the right time,
Ah,
and it really works. Normally, I'm going between here and Morocco, which is it's an overnight flight. It's exhausting. It's a day of travel once I get there and half a day of travel here. So it's a long trip. But as long as I can get my stomach on that time ahead of time, it really makes a huge difference. I see.
excellent.
I never have that
Anybody?
problem. I eat all the time.
I was gonna say, does anyone else?
That's what I do.
Um,
That's what I do. I have many. I have mini meals, several a day, several hours apart, and I also don't let myself sleep for more than 3 hours at a time without waking up for a half an hour for at least 2 days ahead of time. It's very smooth. It's really amazing.
There's an app now that figures out for you when to go to bed for 5 days before wherever you're going. I can't remember, a time jumper, time leaper, something like that. You can Google that too.
um, Marilyn.
Yes. I want nobody's talked about cruises, river cruises or ocean cruises. So I'm wondering what the advantages. We all know about many of the disadvantages, particularly on large cruise ships, but on a smaller ship or a river cruise, have any of the panelists had that experience as a solo traveler, and how did that work out?
Think Kay's wheelhouse for sure.
I was a travel blogger for about 7 years, and the first time I found out you could get free trips doing that was when Viking River Cruises offered me a free trip, and subsequently, I went on 9 of those for free. So try me too late, the travel blogger thing's so over, but they charge full price for 2 on those. So most of the river cruises don't have any kind of decent pricing for people solo, and, and because they don't, they attract couples. And they're friend couples often, and I've never done it with a boy half of a couple with me, but I've done it with my sister and friends. But they aren't very receptive. Everybody sits at dining room tables each night, and you find groups they aren't very solo friendly, the river cruises. And I did do one European line as well. Um, I I don't do big ocean cruises, and expedition was, I went to Antarctica and the Arctic Circle, and I'm going to Greenland, no comment, this year. And those you get, they're expensive by their nature. So you're probably not going to get a bargain, although I've gotten mine on sale. But they have people do go on their own because a lot of people have always wanted to go to Antarctica, but their spouse would dream of it. So you do get people on their own there, and they're very hardcore travelers, and they're very willing to mix it up. But more conventional cruises, I can't speak to. Those are the
And,
ones I know.
and I'm gonna speak to the National Geographic expedition that I went on, which I really enjoyed as a solo traveler because it was all communal meals. And not only that, it was all nature lovers. So we all did stuff together, and I developed a couple of friendships, people I'm still in touch with now. Both of them, it was males, both of them were in couples. They were there with their spouses, but we hung out, and the nature of the activities were such that we were on an expedition together. So I've heard the same thing, Kay, that you've mentioned about Viking, that it's not so friendly like that. National Geographic also does, you have to look very carefully on, they partner with Lindblad, and they do have some trips and some cabins that they market just for single people. And a lot of something we haven't talked about, I have found, and I'd be interested, Kay, your thoughts on this, that if you book way ahead of time or if you book last minute, those are the best strategies for getting the best price. Because a lot of times they have an empty bed and they want to fill it. If it's last minute, and if you book way ahead of time, they're just trying to get the trip confirmed that they have enough people going on the trip that it's actually going to go. But it's in that middle where you pay the highest price. At least that, and again, that's been my experience. It may be totally different, but
I don't think it's true for Viking because I got to know them well while I was a blogger and they were giving me all these trips. They essentially never have trouble filling an itinerary now, and they don't end up discounting at the last bit. But there may be some that do. So many of the old things that you book early or book last minute, you could save money if all by the wayside with the post-pandemic travel so different.
got it. I want to mention one other thing too that I haven't mentioned, which is Tour Radar, which is an aggregation site. So if you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, there's all these different companies, how do I research it? They aggregate not all of them, many of the companies. So I feel like if I want to get a sense for who goes to a particular place, I can put in the location and the month that I want to go, and it's helpful. And I think there might be a few others like that. And then I know there's some that don't list on there, so I go back out and look at those. But it's a time saver to use some of these aggregation sites if you don't want to go to each and every one and look.
Another kind of riff on that, Steve, is if you're thinking of planning a DIY trip, you're going to do it all yourself. I go and look at itineraries from top level companies and then see where do they go. If they're going to go to Basque, Spain, somebody's planning a trip there, I see where they go. And then I plan my trip. I'm going to use that to inform it rather than starting totally from scratch. And so you can also use travel companies to do your research a little bit.
Both for the hotels they stay at, but also the sites they go and see.
Excellent point. Is there anyone who has a comment that succinctly that they'd like to share, or a very quick question as we wrap up? It's a quarter past the hour. I want to honor everyone's time.
We
Anyone?
all eat a lot of meals every day. We want to go have a few.
Right. And you were gracious enough to share a lot of good information. I can imagine people are trying to soak it all in. First and foremost, thank you to Susan, to Steve, and to Kay for scratching the surface at the wealth of information and experience you were interested in sharing with everyone. I know I greatly appreciated it. I learned a ton, and I can imagine others did as well. It's also the topic that I have a feeling there are many others on the screen who registered, who also said I have a lot of experience traveling. And so I have a feeling this could be a conversation we have, a subject we have a second time. The idea with table talks is that they're 4 times a year. They are free. They're always on Zoom. We're always looking for panelists. The next one is in August, figuring that people might be doing things in the summertime or whatever. And then again in November, that sort of goes through the 2026 year. That information is on the Navigating Solo website. All information is there for programming. I'm the one who sends out Navigating Solo emails, and I try to be very kind to your inbox, that I only send things when it might have slipped through a crack and it might be a program you might be interested in. I do not and never will share my email list, give out anyone's contact information unless they've given approval. So do not think you are on some sales list. You are not. This is my business, yes, but you are not on a sales list. That is not the way I do business. I was raised by a CPA and a teacher, and I'm probably one of the most ethical people you will ever encounter. So thank you to our panelists and to all of you for choosing to spend the time, to contributing to chat, to sending in your questions and all of that. Like any other Navigating Solo program, when I close out the Zoom, or when you close out your Zoom, there will be a survey that pops up. I'm going to say thank you. And hopefully we will see all of you again soon. Our panelists are going to stay on for a quick debriefing. And I hope everyone has a great rest of the day or evening, depending on what part of your day you're in. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for coming. Thanks for having us.